To all Ferrari fans out there, this is a rumour worth noting, that the team could move parts of their operation away from Maranello. Because right now, Ferrari stands alone in a very particular and crucial manner. The situation regarding Ferrari is a very curious one. After a very impressive 2024 campaign which brought Maranello to within a dozen points of silverware, the team now finds itself being hounded with reports of changes at the top, their drivers insisting that their path is the right one to walk and just theirs alone, and not to mention the truth that right now the SF25 is a car that is not worthy of winning races, and is only worthy of securing podiums every now and again, and in the hands of Charles Leclerc. And it really doesn't help that Mercedes are now back in a position where they feel quite strong in comparison to their rivals. In fact, so strong that they feel that they can easily just kick Red Bull while they're down again. That's a real turning point, which I talked about in yesterday's video. But for today's video, this is all about the Scuderia, and a bombshell rumour that one Nico Rosberg dropped a couple of days ago, and has only just been picked up by organisations. But I must point something really important, that Nico did not take a selfie in front of Ferrari headquarters. Right now, he is just speaking about rumours and what he's heard and saying, "Oh, don't worry, my boy Lewis can turn things around. He's absolutely fantastic, even though he doesn't speak to me anymore, and I miss him terribly." But the thing that Nico said, a passing comment on Sky Sports F1 show, suggested that Ferrari might be poised to explore a move to the UK, to set up a base of operations there, alongside their historic home, which Enzo himself set up. And so far, Rosberg's remark remains the sole source of this claim, echoed by only a few websites, although the momentum is steadily increasing as the news disseminates around the internet. In truth, there are no job applications or any confirmations within Company House, which is the government portal for the UK if a new business has been set up. The only other big claim that you could maybe connect to Nico's statements are from Lewis, that there are big changes afoot within the organisation of Ferrari that he simply can't talk about yet. Because the team boss is certainly not going to be saying anything, because he's busy fighting for his life within the media and the press, because he's been talking about damaging reports in relation to his job security. The rumours about Christian Horner replacing him aren't going away, much like the rumours regarding Verstappen going elsewhere aren't going away. It, in the eyes of Vasseur, is all seeking to damage his credibility, and once again, move the revolving doors of Ferrari and get rid of yet another team principal before they really had the chance to do anything. Because let's be real, within the last 10 years, they have gone through so many. So it wouldn't surprise me at all that eventually Vasseur gets the Ferrari legal team going, and that potentially might be making use of the very strict defamation laws that are taking place in Italy. So I'd be very concerned if you're an Italian publication, Ferrari might come after you. But for the sake of discussion, here are Nico's words for your consideration. Ahem. So I've seen a little bit of inner workings there at Ferrari, and you can see that the level of excellence that they're at is not comparable to the British teams, and especially to someone like Mercedes in many areas, whether it goes from marketing to other areas. So you can just see there the whole culture, the fact that they're in Italy, it makes it a lot more difficult to them. For example, at Mercedes, whenever Lewis had a thing, he would just go to Toto, and Toto would be able to make the decision, call the shot immediately, done. Whereas at Ferrari, there's so many different decision makers, and even Lewis doesn't really know. Okay, if I ask him and he says yes and he does it, and the other guy still complains afterwards, it's all a bit difficult there. There's a couple of ideas that I've heard going around. I think Ferrari's been exploring to perhaps open a kind of subsidiary in the UK, because that's where the F1 ecosystem is. So I've heard rumours that they're also thinking about opening a subsidiary there. Now, by the way, this is not the first time that Ferrari has maybe flirted with the idea of a UK base of operations, because it has happened before. Back in the 80s, designer John Barnard, famed for pioneering McLaren's carbon fibre MP41, was hired to modernise Ferrari for 1986. But Barnard insisted on working from a UK hub near McLaren's Woking HQ, actually based in Guildford, it being called the Ferrari Guildford Technical Office, and that was to stay close to suppliers and maybe avoid Ferrari's internal politics. But Piero Ferrari later called it, according to Grand Prix 24/7, a big mistake, believing it disrupted rather than helped the team. Although, to be fair, over the time that John Barnard worked with Ferrari, it's not like they failed miserably or anything. In fact, there was plenty of innovation to be had. Ferrari pioneering the first ever semi-automatic gearbox, the paddle shifters. It was all born from within the Ferrari fold. and within a few years it became commonplace. And it also resulted in John Barnard getting a second go-around from 93 and 97, it culminating in them having a championship-worthy car with Michael Schumacher, it going down to the wire. So it's not like an outsider designer was an absolute lost cause for Ferrari, it did yield something, but in the words of Piero, it just went against the grain of tradition, and that ruffled feathers despite success coming their way. So it does really throw up a really big concern and a foam of doubt within this team that Ferrari, sure, they're a storied team. They've had so much success in the past, but these days, you need to adapt. And in an upcoming video, in many cases of a downfall of a team, it's either down to mismanagement or an inability to keep up with the times. Now, of course, times have changed, as has technology, which means a hub and spoke operation where there is a UK base might be able to work, especially around the Midlands area, which means that communication and the passing of information, which may have taken days or the use of a fax machine, could be done instantly with total clarity, no bottlenecks whatsoever, really. Well, I mean, except the likes of air freight or something like that, but I could easily imagine that any UK hub that Ferrari had would be mainly a brainstorming operation where ideas can be manifested with people that are naturally talented and are at the heart of Formula One in terms of technical operations, and it can then be transposed to Italy, and then things can go from there. However, I do believe that the vice chairman of Ferrari, that's Piero Ferrari, he's still knocking around, echo many sentiments up and down within the management structure of Ferrari that, no, everything is fine exactly the way it is, thank you very much. We do not want to change because it will upset the tradition of Ferrari. You remember the movie Rush, where Niki Lauda goes off on one about the car, and they say, you can't say that, it's Ferrari, you can't do that, it's Ferrari. But is tradition a realistic excuse these days? Because Ferrari are now the only team in F1 who doesn't have a UK base of some description. Audi's established one recently with Sauber, Racing Bulls, another Italian stalwart, has set up a base not far from Red Bull Racing in Milton Keynes. Even Cadillac has one in Silverstone itself. That being birthed from the efforts of the Andretti family and their realisation that in order to get the best people in the sport possible, you need to offer people a place of work within what many folks dub Motorsport Valley. It's why when they announced they were going to have a Silverstone base Andretti, I thought it was a fantastic idea, that it meant that the Andrettis had done their homework, that they understood what it would take to have a competitive operation, that you've got to have at least some people who are based within Silverstone, they don't have to relocate, and if they get a job offer, or if they apply, then it's just a turnkey deal. They don't have to move, they just change their commute. Far less stressful than having to think, well, how am I going to learn Italian, and how am I going to be able to move my stuff all the way halfway across the continent? But what Andretti and now Cadillac are doing and maintaining is a true understanding of how F1 works, and Ferrari's belligerence about this, and if they don't do this, it shows that, you know, they are just relying on their legacy and they are not willing to change. And as we have seen throughout the history of Formula One, Ferrari have been very stubborn when it comes to change. So even though I will hold up the spanner once more to remind you that this is a speculative piece, I do think Rosberg's comments carry some weight. Because yeah, sure, he's not a Ferrari insider. In fact, you could argue him being a Mercedes outsider, he's the complete opposite of that. But he is a former world champion with an access all areas pass, because that's what you get when you become a world champion. And as Nelson Piquet demonstrated, it can easily be taken away from you. But he is also a TV pundit, which means that he talks to many people up and down the grid who have plenty of insider information. And also using that broadcasting experience, Nico has qualified it by saying, I've heard rumours. He's been very cautious with the way he delivered this piece that he found out, and that potentially it could be second-hand information. So therefore, the claims do remain unconfirmed. But what if there was another person who provided some clues as to maybe big changes, as I said earlier, could be related to a UK base? Enter Lewis Hamilton. Ah yes, Nico's old flame. You got to admit, Lewis's lot right now, it's a very weird lot. Results have not been forthcoming, which has resulted in his longest dry spell in terms of podiums in a single season. Lewis has never gone this long, 10 races, from the start of a season before getting in the top 3. However, the main source of intrigue has been in relation to where his team is headed. Whilst Hamilton has been calling for more consistent upgrades, and unsure as to why they haven't been as regular as he'd been afforded with Mercedes, because you remember last year, Toto just kept boasting, saying, don't you worry about the W15, we've got plenty of updates coming, it's almost like we've got one for every single Grand Prix. And seriously, they did. They came with a brand new part for every single race for a long time. It's only at the end of that year did they then move on to 2025. Changes were happening quickly, which then manifested in his glorious 9th Silverstone win, and then the win in Spa. But now, it's been a complete change of culture, and it's something I don't think Lewis likes. But then this interesting and cryptic little chestnut emerged which got people talking. So now, here are Lewis's comments for your consideration, and we shall be comparing and contrasting shortly. Ahem. The mindset for me, I'm like, there's a lot of changes that need to be made in the system. I wish I could tell you what's happening. There's a lot going on in the background. Yeah, I can't say too much about it. There's so many things I wish I could tell you that could explain the things that have happened this year, the problems we had, and what's going on within the organisation. But my goal is to try and positively influence, try and get change so we can have long-term success. There's a lot of changes that we need. For me, it's that foundation building. We're not fighting for a championship. Oh, that's quite intriguing if you ask me. Hamilton's complaints have been born from there being so many different decision makers slowing progress. Rosberg says exactly the same, contrasting Ferrari's layers with the one-stop chain of command he and Hamilton enjoyed under Toto Wolff at Mercedes. Both therefore identify the same pain point, because if they did tap into the rich pool of talent within the UK and have an R&D base, it doesn't have to be a huge one, like some kind of skunkworks operation, which means they do have access to that personnel without those new staff members potentially having to really up sticks and make some really drastic life changes. It could also suit Hamilton's work style. It does seem like a very, very logical step, that something needs to be done here, and something really, really pivotal and monumental. But however, this all still remains a hypothetical, and until we get some proper confirmation via Company House and any filings that the Scuderia manifest within the UK government, yeah, it is unconfirmed, so let's just make that clear here, okay? But make no mistake, Hamilton's making it very clear that he is trying to use his force for change, for good, to better the odds of Ferrari having long-term and sustained success. That, yeah, I don't think he's going to be retiring at the end of the year. He's not going to be giving up that easily. Lewis has got something good here, and he's got the room, or at least he's getting the room, while Charles Leclerc has been busy doing his own thing, insisting that the development of this year's car continues, because it might be able to win a couple of races, it could salvage second place in the constructors at minimum, or if McLaren really falter, Norris and Piastri taking points away from one another, Leclerc could be in a good position to maybe go for the title, or at least try and get some better success than what they're doing right now. The only reason they're not fourth is because the second Red Bull seat is still providing a little few problems, but once that gets online again and Yuki's taking names, then Ferrari might be in trouble. But you've got to admit, the situation at Ferrari is really confusing because, yeah, Lewis Hamilton may have the floor within Ferrari, but out of the two drivers, it's Charles Leclerc who's been the more successful. So there is definitely a bind going on within the Scuderia, and there is a sign that what is happening right now and what has been working up until the end of last year just isn't working anymore. And Lewis's presence has been the thing to really hold up the red flags. And what may suggest that Lewis could win out anyway is because there have been many reports alongside Charles Leclerc doing his own thing that they're hanging on to his every word, Lewis says. So therefore there could be a ever-growing compulsion for something to change, and Fred Vasseur getting Lewis ultimately being provided by the likes of John Elkann, him boasting to anyone who would listen that he was instrumental in getting Lewis's deal across the line, then maybe Fred could easily end up with a very key and critical ally for his own survival, because you could easily argue the same thing with Valtteri Bottas over at Mercedes, that he managed to stay around for so long as the second Mercedes driver because Lewis wanted him around. So if Lewis says somebody is going to stay, then they are going to stay. And maybe Hamilton's own connections with those within the UK Midlands region could be utilised. After all, Ferrari's already got two high-end Mercedes staffers alongside him, one of which was poised to be a potential successor to Toto, that being Jerome D'Ambrosio, who has since become Fred Vasseur's second. That is a start, but more needs to be done. Taken together, both Nico and Lewis's comments point to one central problem which Vasseur is regularly and aggressively swatting away when asked by the media, and that is to do with the decision-making process at Ferrari being a complete and utter mess, but not an incurable mess. Things can be done to change it, there just needs to be the desire to change it. There are two possible cures. Either completely rebuild the structure within Italy, which means that you don't have to rely on the UK talent pool, Or if that is just simply too much of a task to bear, then just build a very lean R&D facility in the Northamptonshire, Oxfordshire region, which means you can then hire people who can act faster and make things happen quickly without a huge bunch of red tape and bureaucracy in the way. And this is a really big question here. If you work within Formula One, or you're an engineer and you realise that there were going to be some job applications and vacancies to do with Ferrari where you live, would you apply? I am seriously curious. Let me know in the comments if you would take up that opportunity. Because I really do think Ferrari needs to do something absolutely fundamental, that it can't just use tradition as an excuse anymore. Because Ferrari's struggles highlighted in Canada reflect deeper issues than just car upgrades. And as Fred noted himself, rivals can recover within a weekend. Ferrari can't. The core problem? Flawed processes and poor execution, as Hamilton has also stressed, and that ultimately everyone within Ferrari has to do a better job. Smoother weekends, Fred said, where execution is nailed from FP1 onwards. So that's why I do believe that Nico's comments and Lewis's comments are connected. They both say the same thing. That Ferrari has slow feedback loops, so things take forever to get done, and then muddled communication. So you hear one thing from one person, you then hear a similar thing from another person, but then when you go back to that original person, it's completely changed, and then you just have to repeat the cycle. And then you've got internal friction, you've got drama between personnel, superiority complexes perhaps, or just a reluctance to think differently outside the box, because maybe there are plenty of other mechanics who work at other teams who are able to think more fluidly, more agile-like, and that means things can get done quickly, and there is the potential to be able to be creative, think differently. Whereas Ferrari, no. Traditions. Therefore, it's just really surprising me that Bottas never got a gig there, because he's all about traditions. But either way, it's a completely different model to what Lewis experienced at Mercedes, and he arguably helped evolve himself for being there for so long. So, will Ferrari actually act upon any advice that he may give? I want to say yes, but Ferrari's history has shown us that change comes slowly, often needing a powerful figure to drive it, and Hamilton, as F1's most decorated driver, could be that force, one capable of pushing through the resistance that has held Ferrari back. As long as Lewis remains motivated and doesn't give up, remaining steadfast in his conviction, he not only could get these changes going, but also be a key ally in making sure Ferrari doesn't revert to type and boot out yet another team principal at the first hint of trouble. I refer you to just 2 examples within Ferrari's history of such a person coming along and really rattling plenty of cages within Maranello, and one of them around the day when Enzo himself was knocking around. Niki Lauda, anybody? He was an absolute brutal reality check for that team, and within the space of, what, a couple of seasons, they were back winning titles. The rest of the 1970s, absolutely golden, where it peaked with Jody Scheckter and Gilles Villeneuve. Then there was the arrival of Jean Todt, who was more than happy to get things moving again. And then when he was backed up by Michael Schumacher, Ross Brawn, and then after Barnard left, Rory Byrne, that was a titanic force and a huge evolution of the team, which carried on for several years. All with the mindset in just tightening up workflows and getting rid of internal politics. But yeah, as the saying goes, and quite apt considering this is an Italian team, Rome wasn't built in a day. It did take time. Even Lauda's remarkable transformation did take some time in which to properly bed itself in. And according to the Wall Street Journal, even Ferrari's road-going CEO Benedetto Vigna says that there is a very big concern regarding a bureaucratic mass index within the Ferrari structure. I mean, to be fair, it is a bit of a shame that the corporate side of Ferrari is getting involved in the race side of Ferrari. You know, the pact of Enzo Ferraris from the 1960s is well and truly dead. But now that I think about it and where Ferrari is right now, maybe that was for the best. That maybe the race team needed some hand-holding in which to try and streamline things. I'm just thinking about this more and more now. And when you look at the way that Fred has been handling the media, which I have said in the past can be rather defensive, it is also incredibly punchy. That it's not somebody who's looking down and say, "Oh, well, we are not exactly sure what's going on, and please don't hate us." No, he's coming out swinging, Fred. And I'm pretty sure that there are many Ferrari fans out there that at least appreciate that somebody has got some balls to counter the media. Especially the Italian media, they can be brutal. But it might be also signalling that the change within Ferrari has begun, that the eternal overhaul that Hamilton wants might be happening, and that maybe a British satellite could be on the table as a logical second step. Yet again, nothing concrete supports it right now. we have to wait until there are some UK-based job listings coming up on Ferrari's website. That would be the first hard proof that Rosberg's rumours are advancing. But until then, the safest reading is this. The Scuderia are rebuilding the hierarchy in Maranello first, and then exploring wider options second. But even if it turns out that the UK rumours are complete and utter bunk, and that Ferrari is going nowhere in terms of its operations, there can be some changes which might yield some benefits for the next few years or so, especially if Lewis commits for that just little bit longer, even as just a simple Ferrari ambassador or as an advisor to Vasseur. Because I don't think you need me to tell you that Fred is very much relying on the backing of Lewis Hamilton and his two new deputies, the likes of Loic Serra in terms of technical director on the chassis front, and Jerome D'Ambrosio, his second in command. They have to hold the fort, those four people, in order to try and get that breakthrough across the line, because even though we saw in 2024 there were plenty of successes and Ferrari could justify that their homegrown technical director Enrico Cardile was a reason why they wouldn't have to rely on an Adrian Newey deal, but then he went over to Aston Martin Enrico to work with Adrian. And then, as we saw with, John Barnard, Adrian Newey coming in, there was talks about maybe relying on outsider talent in terms of design, but then that didn't work out with Ferrari's traditions and ethics and understanding of vetoing powers about who he could hire or fire. It just was clear to Fred that, tradition was just not going to work with what Newey wanted. And now what we're seeing with Aston Martin, and it's easily making people's jaws drop. But I do think some outsider thinking wouldn't go amiss, and with Serra and D'Ambrosio there in some really big technical capacities and can easily maybe source some brand new talent, having a UK base might not be such a bad idea, and they could be the two main instigators of it, that they can use their connections and try and bring some more people to Ferrari, because you constantly see headlines about teams saying, oh, look at how many people we post from X team and Y team. We're hiring so many people these days. Our workforce is strong. We don't hear this from Ferrari at all. Are they going through some kind of brain drain of their own, or are they just treading water, just fine with the people that they've got already? To say once again that everything is fine the way it is, and anyone who is suggesting otherwise, that they have to rely on outsiders, are either met with deathly silence or the door. But if true, if Ferrari did rely on a UK base once more, like they had in the 80s and the 90s for a brief period and is often not talked about, then it might mean a genuine force for change, that Ferrari is serious in trying to evolve and keep up with the times that are F1. Because even though you might be thinking this is British bias, the reality is this: Motorsport Valley is a thing. So many teams, including the incoming Cadillac team, are relying on that talent pool in order to bring them results really quickly. Ferrari is standing alone over there, relying on its legacy, its traditions, to be able to make it work no matter what. And even though it is commendable that traditions are being kept, even Faenza, Racing Bulls, former Minardi, are relying on the UK talent pool around Milton Keynes, and it might be bringing them results that we are seeing on the track already, and it's producing Isaac Hadjar the platform in which to impress people. And yeah, Rosberg and Hamilton's thing about decision-making in Ferrari, it's just so true. And if Lewis did resort to going to John Elkann saying that this needs to happen, I do think it will happen, because you remember throughout the entire negotiation process that John Elkann said that whatever philanthropic efforts that Lewis Hamilton wanted to manifest, he would then bankroll and Ferrari would defend to the hilt. And maybe that kind of force will bulldoze through any internal resistance, because, well, the chairman of Ferrari said yes, and Lewis wants it, and Hamilton would benefit with getting some familiarity back. And it means that Hamilton really wouldn't have to adapt too much, because he would have brought his way of thinking that worked with Mercedes over to Ferrari, and they would benefit as well from getting some good insider knowledge. And also, it would signal that Ferrari is actually serious about wanting to win, instead of just simply relying on tradition carrying them through. So if these rumours turn out to be true, I think this will be the world of good for Ferrari, that they are relying on the geographical realities that, Britain has some really good talent within the motorsport sector, that they are prepared to negotiate about where they're based, whereas success, that's not negotiable. You have to win, Ferrari. And speaking of success, Toto and George might have succeeded at their most fun pastime, screwing around with Christian Horner. To find out why I think the lack of discussion regarding the latter's contract makes sense now, watch this video next, straight after this one.